He refused to carry a gun into battle. His own army tried to have him thrown out for it, twice. Then one morning, on top of a Japanese-held cliff, he became one of the most effective soldiers on that entire battlefield, without ever firing a weapon. This is the true story of Desmond Doss, and the day the men who once called him a coward begged him not to leave. Before the war, Doss worked at a naval shipyard. That job alone could have kept him out of the fighting completely. His own boss offered to help him get the paperwork. He turned it down. Doss wanted to serve his country. But because of his faith, there was one thing he believed he could never do: take another human life. Doss did not believe that meant he had to hide from the war. He believed that while other men were fighting to take lives, he could go with them and save lives. So he chose to become a medic. He called himself a conscientious cooperator. Not someone running from duty, but someone who believed his place in the war was to help the wounded. He would face the same bullets, the same artillery, the same enemy, but he would do it without a weapon. The Army didn't know what to do with a soldier like that. During training, Doss wouldn't touch a rifle. He was mocked, ostracized, harassed while he prayed. Officers tried to have him discharged for being mentally unfit. They tried and failed to punish him for refusing to carry a weapon. The men in his unit were certain of one thing: this man would get someone killed. They had no idea how wrong they were. Most people only know what happened at Okinawa. But Okinawa wasn't his first battle. Doss had already served in combat on Guam and on Leyte, earning 2 Bronze Stars for running through enemy fire to reach wounded men. By the time he reached the place that would make him famous, he wasn't an untested medic having one lucky day. He was already a proven soldier. He just happened to be unarmed, and his compassion did not stop at the American lines. Accounts from the Pacific describe Doss treating wounded enemy soldiers as well. To him, a wounded man was still a human life in danger. That belief was about to be tested on a scale almost impossible to imagine. Okinawa, the Leyte Escarpment, a 400-foot cliff the men called Hacksaw Ridge. American troops fought their way to the top. Then Japanese artillery, mortars, and machine gun fire tore through them. The attack collapsed. Survivors began falling back down the escarpment. But Doss stayed. Wounded soldiers were still trapped on top of the ridge. Some were unable to walk, others were completely exposed, and Japanese troops were still nearby. Doss began moving through the battlefield alone. One by one, he reached the wounded. He treated them, dragged them toward the edge of the cliff, tied a rope around them, and lowered them hundreds of feet down the escarpment to soldiers waiting below. Then he turned around and went back for another, and another, and another. He stayed exposed on that plateau for hours. Every trip back onto the ridge meant risking artillery, machine gun fire, Japanese soldiers, and death. But Doss kept going. Witnesses later remembered him praying the same thing again and again: "Lord, just help me get one more." He would lower one wounded soldier down the cliff, then disappear back into the battlefield. Minutes later, another wounded man would come down, then another, then another. The exact number became the subject of disagreement. Doss believed he had saved around 50 men. His commanding officer believed the number was closer to 100. They eventually settled on 75. Think about that. Desmond Doss became famous for saving 75 men, and he was the one arguing that the number should be lower. But saving dozens of men in one day would have been enough to make him a legend. Doss kept going back for weeks. Days later, he went 200 yards in front of American lines to reach one wounded soldier. Then he crawled to within 8 yards of a Japanese-held cave. 4 wounded Americans were trapped nearby. Doss treated them under fire. Then he made separate trips to get them out. He reached another wounded man dangerously close to the enemy. Doss treated him, picked him up, and carried him around 100 yards to safety. Then came May 21st. A grenade exploded near Doss. Fragments tore into his legs. He was badly wounded, but instead of calling another medic into danger to help him, Doss treated his own wounds. Then he waited. 5 hours passed before litter bearers could finally reach him. They placed him on a stretcher and began carrying him towards safety. Then the group came under attack again. While being carried away, Doss saw another wounded soldier nearby. The man's condition was worse than his own, so Doss did something extraordinary. After waiting 5 hours to be evacuated, he rolled off the stretcher and told the bearers to take the other man instead. Doss was left behind, Then he was hit again. A bullet shattered his arm. Desmond Doss, the man who had refused to carry a rifle through his entire time in the Army, finally picked one up, not to fire it. He used the rifle stock as a splint. He tied it to his shattered arm. Then, wounded in the legs and with one arm badly damaged, Doss began crawling, nearly 300 yards, across rough battlefield terrain, toward an aid station. The unarmed medic, who had spent weeks carrying other men to safety, now had to drag himself there alone. In the confusion of the battle, word came back that Desmond Doss had been killed. The news reached his hometown. It ran on the front page. His family read that their son was dead. Doss proved otherwise the only way he could. He wrote a letter home to his mother. Months later, on October 12, 1945, Desmond Doss stood at the White House. President Harry Truman placed the Medal of Honor around his neck. The man soldiers had once mocked for refusing to carry a weapon had received America's highest military decoration for valor. The men who once believed he would get someone killed now knew the truth. When they were trapped on that ridge, the unarmed soldier had been the one who refused to leave them behind. But the war never fully let him go. Doctors later discovered tuberculosis in his lungs. He lost one lung and 5 ribs. He spent years moving in and out of hospitals. Eventually, he lost his hearing completely. He lived quietly after the war, largely away from the spotlight, until he died in 2006 at the age of 87. They called him a coward because he refused to carry a weapon. But when the bullets started flying, Desmond Doss kept walking toward the wounded while other men were trying to escape. He went into battle with no rifle, no pistol, and no intention of taking a life. But when men were dying around him, he refused to leave them behind. Because courage was never about what Desmond Doss was willing to carry. It was about who he was willing to go back for.